Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time. Once again, let's talk metal. This episode is long overdue. I'm going to do the probably shortest deep dive possible. It's a band with a very short discography, but it's a discography I find really interesting, and I should have covered this a long time ago, it feels like. The topic for this deep dive is the French band KALISIA. Now, I've never really heard anybody else talk about this band. The only time it's come up, I have heard it pronounced Calicia as well. So apologies if I've got it wrong. I've always thought of it as Calicia, and that's the pronunciation I will go with. This was a kind of long-running French act, but they just didn't put out a lot of material. The material they did release, however, I think is absolutely fantastic. And since nobody seems to know much about them, when I've brought them up from time to time, I get pretty much silence. I figured it's time to give them a chance to shine a little bit. I found out about this band back in the cassette trading days. And you know how these things worked. You exchanged lists with people, sent them things that they wanted, but if there was room left on the tapes, you just kind of crammed on extra stuff that you liked and you thought they might want to check out. Or you just wanted to kind of, spread the word about some cool new single, demo, album, whatever it was that you could squeeze in that you thought people should know about. In the mid and especially the late 90s, I was doing some, really big tape trades with different people all over the place where, you'd fill, 4, 6, 8, 90-minute TDK tapes, and just get, these massive volumes of stuff back and forth from people. And in one big tape trade, one of the extra things that somebody crammed in on one of the cassettes was a four-track, what I always thought of as an EP by this band called KALISIA. I do not remember if I had ever heard of them before or not. It seems very unlikely. I don't know where I would have come across the name whatsoever. They had this one four-track recording. It was released in 1995 through Adventurous Records. Adventurous released some pretty interesting things in the mid and late 90s. They were always very hard to get a hold of. Their distribution was not particularly good. The label doesn't have a great reputation in hindsight. I think a lot of artists on that label had issues with them. And yeah, I felt like, they didn't really get much of a push, promotion, distribution, or anything else. But Calicia had started out earlier than this under the name Whisper and recorded some demo tracks in 1994. Then they changed names, made this four-track recording originally as a demo that Adapasher then ended up just releasing as the band's actual first official release. Again, I'm not sure if the band meant for that to happen or not. This may have been one of those cases where the label got the demo, liked it, and just immediately pressed it up. And the band was like, but wait, that wasn't ready to go. I'm not sure. That's why I said I always have thought of it as an EP. And it's four tracks, about the right length for an EP. But Metal Archives does technically list it as a demo release that was originally done as like a limited cassette pressing. Uh, when I show this, there's not a lot to see. Once again, Adbashir, not known for going nuts on art budget or anything. Let's take this out of the case so there's a little less glare. It's a very dark print cover. You have the band's logo up here in the top corner. It says Skies here across the bottom, which is the title of the demo slash EP. And the cover has like, some kind of purplish, storm clouds going on in the background. Uh, Backside of the booklet is this, so you can read the band's name a lot better. I have always suspected this particular copy is a bootleg copy. The print on the booklet is not particularly great. You may be able to see that, just the print quality doesn't seem all that good. But on the other hand, Adapashare releases weren't necessarily known for always being top-notch either. So it's possible it's an original and it just really does look like this. I need to, pull it up on Discog sometimes, check the matrix number and figure that out. And there's the disc. If it was bootlegged, it was bootlegged pretty early on because I got this sometime in the very late 90s or earliest 2000s. but it's quite possible somebody had, pressed up copies at home and sold them. I got it from someone on eBay who was just, buy it now for like, $20 or something. Because it's, again, Adabashir titles a bit hard to see or a bit hard to find. So yeah, not the most exciting thing to look at. And I got it, just added into this tape trade, so it wasn't something I had really requested or anything. But as soon as I heard it, I was just really impressed with what was going on musically. I'll play a clip or two here in a second, but yeah, KALISIA operates as a death metal band, but they really have their own sound. There are progressive elements, there's melodic elements, and well, let's go to iTunes over here and have a quick listen. Play the intro of the first track, which is called Tower of Vanities. This again is from the 1995 Skies release. All right, that gives you a taste of what KALISIA is doing. They're using a death metal vocal delivery, but the song structures, are very adventurous. There's a stronger sense of melody, although it's not in the, Gothenburg school whatsoever. While this was, again, originally sort of as a demo, the production's not amazing, but you can still hear like, very audible, solid bass lines going on there. And yeah, you can tell these are musicians who know what they're doing and have put these songs together pretty carefully, to develop a very particular aesthetic. Let's also play a clip of track number 3, which is called Lost Soul.
Cold gust of wind running throughout the desert plain, dark clouds choking the sky. High above the world, gale cries. He's been there for weeks, alone, searching for himself. He knew voices were gone now and nature became silent. He could feel that God was listening to him, so he started to talk.
So yeah, there you go. Again, very interesting blend of things going on. This is not a band that's interested in just singing about, zombies or gore or internal struggles of the human condition. They've got a very expansive sound. The intro to that piece is, very soft, very beautiful with, the unusual female vocals, but it leads beautifully into, the main riff of the song. And there are times that KALISIA does have some of that mid '90s melodic death metal styling. If you look on Metal Archives for like similar artists tab, which I don't usually check, but I was interested to see what they would recommend as something similar to KALISIA. You see names like Panthymonium and Edge of Sanity, and I think there's something to that. I don't know how far I would take that comparison, but yeah, there's just something in the general approach to songwriting that, again, adventurous is always the word I thought of. This is not a band that's, looking to be, cavernous or subterranean or anything. They feel like they are really looking at the horizon. It's a very uplifting kind of melodic death metal. It doesn't stray too far into, the gothic territory that would become popular with, all the sort of Beauty and the Beast, the Beauty and Darkness compilation series, for example. Doesn't really go in that direction too much, although there's maybe some elements of that sound worked in. There's a little bit of that wistful romanticism, but just delivered in a very different way. So, bottom line, I got really obsessed with this set of 4 songs that were tacked onto this TDK tape that I knew nothing about. Just somebody had added it as, hey, I've got 20 extra minutes of space on this tape. Let's jam this on here. And really, really liked it. So yeah, I tracked this down, a few years later to have a hard copy of it because cassette tapes don't last all that long. There was never a lot of information to be found about the band. It became one of those names I just kind of, punched into eBay from time to time, trying to find other stuff. And around 2001, I did actually get a hit, but it wasn't another KALISIA recording. It was something by a band called CHRYSALIS, which is titled Between Strength and Frailty. And so just in the, eBay title for the CD, they also had the name KALISIA. And so I was like, what the heck's with that? I've never seen or heard of this before. Had to do a lot of digging around, but it turned out that a couple of the members in KALISIA were participating in this project as well. And so I was like, you know what? I can't find anything else by KALISIA, but if it's got some of the same members, it might be in the same vein. And it was really cheap. It was like, buy it now, $8 or something. You can still find this, pretty inexpensive. It's unknown. It's nobody's looking for it. So it's very cheap. Copies are still out there. Got it. And yeah, while it's not the exact same lineup, the band is also from France, and they are working in a very similar sonic space. So let's check out a clip or two from this uh, related project called Chrysalis. And let's see, which one do we want to go with here? Looking at clips I've put up. We'll just do part of the opening track, Eruption Within. That gives you a pretty good idea of what Chrysalis was working on. right. So yeah, you can tell they're operating, in a vein and style very similar to the KALISIA Skies recording from about 6 years before this. A very small nitpick, but I never liked this band picture. To me, it looks like they're sitting in like a high school gymnasium on the bleachers or something. So I'm not really sure what is going on. But yeah, it never struck me as a great, setting for a picture. But nevertheless, another really interesting recording. There's a lot going on in these songs. They're put together, very meticulously, and they have, again, that very kind of bright sound to them. This isn't trying to be, dreary or overly gloomy or anything like that. It's very atmospheric, but in kind of a more positive way rather than the typically, sad, negative, depressive way that we associate with, death metal and other extreme metal. Sadly, this is about the only thing that Chrysalis did. They demoed some material in 2002. I have not heard that material, so can't comment on it. I don't know if it was ever released anywhere officially. But yeah, so it's kind of like, okay, great. There's this cool four-track EP from KALISIA, and now 6 years later, there's this really cool four-track EP from Chrysalis, and the material's not adding up very quickly here, but it's something that continue to keep an eye out for moving forward. And eventually there was more activity on the KALISIA side of things. In 2009, they finally released their debut album. So there's a 14-year gap between the release of Skies in 95 and the release of a full-length KALISIA album in 2009. Yes, I was still checking and keeping an eye out for stuff by this band. A solid decade after I first heard the Skies material. The album, it is called Sibion. And again, I may be slightly mispronouncing it. Maybe it's supposed to be like Sibion, but I want to go with Sibion. It's a 2 CD digipack release. Turn it here where the light's not glaring so much. So yeah, simpler band name spelled out this time, not the big spiky logo from the Skies release. And there's a different pressing of this done for Japan with slightly different artwork and such, but otherwise the overall package is built pretty similar. You can kind of tell this was a labor of love, that the band put a lot of attention into all the little details. I don't think there's anything that is random or coincidental about the recording or the release of Sibian. Even, for example, the runtime is exactly 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds. And I think that's extremely deliberate because part of the theme of this album is man's future kind of going into not just outer space and exploring the cosmos, but also going into cyberspace and exploring digital realities and such. It is a concept album, so the entire thing tells one long-running story. You're following a particular scientist who's kind of involved with this. There's a background thing where there's been contact with aliens in the near future with humanity. And it's one of those situations where the aliens basically are kind of running things. There's no war. They don't hunker the earth with, bombs or missiles or mutants. They just kind of show up and it's like, yeah, cool. You guys are going to do things our way now. And we're just kind of like, yeah, I guess we are because you're much more advanced and powerful than we are. But there's a lot in the story about then, kind of mankind's evolution, whether it's genetic or mental or getting into, again, things like, cyber realities. It kind of feels a little bit like the classic sci-fi novel Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, where it's exploring that same kind of, futuristic setting. What happens to mankind if you were kind of under the thumb of a nice set of aliens and exploring mankind's potential, but also still really focusing on what are the limitations of our species. In this story, as our main character, evolves into, one of these, higher beings, there's still a lot of limits on, being isolated, being sad, lonely, not being connected. As he gets more and more powerful, he kind of loses more and more connections to the rest of the species. Uh, yes, you can read the things. The book to this is ridiculously thick because they have a ton of text. Like every song, has its own page with artwork, mankind going off to explore the cosmos. Then, signals being recorded from an unknown alien species. So yeah, gorgeous artwork for every single page, for every single song. They developed what, as far as I know, is a unique sort of like, alien set of alphabet to represent, the lines from, alien contact being made. So yeah, they didn't really skimp on any little detail like that whatsoever. There's a lot of passages in here that are just narrative to kind of help you follow along the story, which is very convoluted. It covers, what I think are like, literally thousands of years of human evolution. So it's a long-term kind of grand science fiction space opera. And goes, again, for a solid hour, 11 minutes and 11 seconds exactly. The style for the music here is leaning in a more symphonic direction for a lot of this. I've talked about it a lot. It's high time to play a clip or two. All of the songs on Sibian have names where it's like two words separated by a slash. So it's kind of like, a pair of words. Let's start off with a clip from track number 3. And this one is titled Union Construction. And this will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on Sibian. All right, so yeah, it goes on and on, but you can hear there's still some grounding in death metal, but it's very symphonically driven now. They're borrowing a lot from the prog metal subgenre, tons of keyboard work, big lush layers of orchestration. Um, they're kind of throwing everything into this, and you can really tell. If there's a complaint to be made about the album, it is almost that it's almost too much, that it really keeps going at that particular level throughout most of its runtime. So, while I think it's, a really cool, interesting, and very engaging listen, it's also a very exhausting one because, they don't really let up at any given point. Songs do vary a bit. There's other musical ideas used for other parts. Let's check out at least one more clip here. Let's go to track 15 or 14. Let's see. Yeah, let's do 15. I think this one is a little bit different. This song title is Confrontation Communication.
What do you say? I feel like to me. I see your face and you smile, trying to deceive me.
All right, so yeah, you can hear again, but more, kind of industrial take for that particular song, but still using the female vocals and stuff. Again, there's a ton to unpack as you work your way through Sibian. Few other things that are neat. I said it was a two-disc set, but at an hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds, everything fits onto one CD. The second disc has some nice extra features on it. The first thing, and the print's a little small here, but they do have a remixed version of all four songs from the Skies demo. So they go back to those tracks from 95 and touch them up and represent them here. So kind of cool to get to rehear those tracks with more maybe thought and attention paid to the production of putting it out as an official thing rather than this demo that suddenly got released, on Adventurous Records back in the day. After that, they also have several cover songs that are included. And I think the cover songs provide a lot of insight into the band's influences and what they're, kind of aspiring to be here. So I'll just read the list of the track choices. We have, let's see, How Could I? Originally done, of course, by Florida death metal virtuosos Cynic. You have a cover of Fortune and Lies from the first Dream Theater album. There's a cover of I Am the Black Wizards by, of course, Norwegian Legends Emperor. And the fourth and last cover choice is This Dazzling Abyss by Loud Blast. So, yeah, a very eclectic set of cover song choices and suitably so for a band, that's incorporating a lot of different ideas and paying a lot of attention to how they built this massive concept album. Again, it's not going to be for everyone. It may be a little too much that goes on for a little too long. Some people, I've played this before, feel like they liked the symphonics and the music a lot, but the vocals were kind of hard for them to get into because, again, it's still got a kind of, raspy death metal sound, but it also sounds like, they're doing a bit of electronic processing and they're using a lot of other, vocal approaches here and there, from female vocals to things that are meant to sound like they're, being recorded transmissions in outer space and such. Again, it's a lot to wrap one's head around. I will not even pretend to say I know all the ins and outs of this album, even though I've been listening to it for, 15 years or so now. When I got this, it was one of those things where you just kind of dive in deep and really enjoy it. I had ended up with a second copy that I found on eBay just like a year later. And it was dirt cheap. I bought it and just gave it to somebody else that I thought would appreciate it. Now, unfortunately, it's gotten kind of hard to find. So can't pick up random copies and give them away anymore. But even just, little things like when you open up the digipack, just, quick, small quotes that kind of focus in on some of the main points of the story. This panel says, would you rather die than live alone? And that's one of the kind of, big central questions that is explored throughout the story is, again, the story of this person trying to evolve and, ascend to their destiny and at the same time, completely almost losing their humanity because there's no one to share these experiences with. And the other panel says, read that one, Union, Grandeur, Survival, which again, three things that are very much themes to the story that is Sibian. So that's it. That's all the band has recorded to date. Metal Archives lists the project as on hold. Don't know if we'll ever see another epic release from France's KALISIA or not, but still monitoring the channels, looking for any particular signs of life or mysterious signals that might indicate that they're returning to orbit. We'll see. All right, now let's talk metal in the comments down below. If this connected with you, that'd be great to know. If it didn't connect with you, that's quite okay too. This isn't something I expect is for everybody. It's just one of these very unusual bands that's kind of outside my normal wheelhouse, but I fell in love with them the first time I heard them, and I've kept with them since. If anybody has any other information about KALISIA, CHRYSALIS, or other projects that the members may have been involved with, please share the information down below. I'd be really interested in it. And there might be a few other folks out there who have connected to this album that would also like to know what you know about this kind of unsung, very adventurous French death metal project. That's going to do it for this video. Hope you have enjoyed it. Everyone take care. And until next time, as always, keep banging your head.